So my question is, all right, you got all these young guys.
Right.
And let's just go with that comparison with the Wings and the Pistons.
Right. By the way, when you say young, do you realize that the Michigan State basketball starting lineup is older than the Pistons?
It's not surprising.
No.
Obviously, that's kind of an Izzo thing as well. But who is the Pistons' Petrie? Who is the Pistons' DeBrincat? Who is the Pistons' now Patrick Kane? Guys that you bring in, you've got a good young core. And some of those guys aren't even here right now.
Right.
And maybe at the end of the year they come up, they get a chance to feel what it's like to be around some of these pros.
Right, the Wings guys, yes.
Yeah. But who is it that Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, go down the list, Sasser, that they're learning from in regards to when you go in and you watch film? Some of this is off season. I know it's hard in the NBA because you play day in and day out, but you're watching film and you're creating a game plan to go into a game to play. How do you study in this particular sport? How do you prepare? How do you prepare your body? How do you make sure that you can play as many of the 82 as possible? None of these guys have that ability to learn from pros that have done it, that have learned from other pros. They're doing it themselves. They're trying to figure it out themselves.
I think the Lions have shown two examples of doing this in two separate regimes. Under Jim Schwartz, he felt it was so important to get Kyle Vanden Bosch here.
Right.
That he went out and was outside his house at midnight on free agency. You look at Brad Holmes, and, he didn't do anything on the field for the Lions. Michael Brockers.
Right. They love the fact that he was in that locker room as a leader.
Anzalone.
Yeah.
And I think his play has been a little bit overrated personally, but he has brought something to this team from a winning environment. And they don't have any veteran leadership.
No,
they have none.
They lost, by their own admission, and thankfully, I thought it was, who cares? Corey Joseph. He was like one of their big veterans that they had last year, right? They got nobody. You look at some of the other young teams like Houston. Well, they went and got, Van Fleet. Okay, tons of money. And I don't know, as a Piston fan, I didn't want him to spend that ridiculous amount for a good veteran player right now. But yeah, their veteran guys are still young. Like Bagley's been in the league 4 or 5 years. He's developed into a really good bench player.
Yeah,
that's it.
You know what this franchise is becoming? They're becoming the new Sacramento Kings.
Yeah,
the Kings were in oblivion for probably 18 years or so from the end of the Weber.
And then they got De'Aaron Fox and turned around.
Right, but they've also went and got a guy like Sabonis who you could just see in college. I could see it, that this guy's he has a game. And it may not be like a star, but when you can't get a superstar, this is how you have to do it.
They gave up a superstar to get him. They gave up Halliburton, which, whatever.
But they're winning.
That to me is part of the Pistons' problem. It all started with that draft.
Yeah.
When they took Killian Hayes instead of Halliburton. All right, let's get some tickets.
Let me just ask quick. I asked you guys in the update, I said, is it just veteran leadership? Or is there anything else that it could be? And I bring this up, and just to throw it out there, I was listening to Pistons Weekly last week for a little bit with Pat. And he had a caller who called in and said that he didn't think Monty Williams was the right kind of coach for this kind of team. Is there anything to that? Because let's face it, this is exactly like last year. He has 2 wins. They had 2 wins since February 10th to close the season.
Right.
They're going to go a whole month without winning a game.
For the most part, they have played much better defense than they did last year, for the most part.
It's fading.
And turnovers are a huge part.
Right, and part of that is because their draft choice is a tremendous defensive player. He's going to be a star. He could end up being a better player than Cade Cunningham, which is incredible to me.
But here, to my point earlier about having those veteran guys, when I went into the NFL, they also had guys like Andy Heck, who had been in the NFL for a decade, now the offensive line coach at Kansas City. I learned from him how to watch film, how to take care of my buddy. Keith Sims, who was a Miami Dolphin for a long time. He was a part of that offensive line. Marco Coleman, who you surprised me with, who was the D-line coach at Michigan State. He was a part of the D-line. You learn how to be a pro from guys that have done it before because they learned from guys that had done it before. Now, you're hoping to do it a little bit better.
Right.
But add to that depth of knowledge they're providing you, that experience that they provided you.
I mean, earlier in the season, we sat there. Look, the other thing they need is people who can shoot threes, okay, and floor spacing. And, look, Bogdanovich, whenever he comes back, that's going to be great. But you know what? You want to flip him at the deadline anyway, okay? And Bogdanovich is not Steph Curry. He's not a great three-point shooter. He's good, okay? But that's not the main problem with this team. But at one point, they had all the three of their best outside shooters, Burks, him, and Joe Harris, who gets hurt every year on that team. I mean, some of the moves that they made. Sadiq Bey, okay? I had no problem with it. They might not want to have extended him like they did Stewart. So you keep him this year. They took a flyer on Wiseman. That's not working. All right, here's some ticket text. Hate to break it to you, but they already lost this generation. Okay? Gorse demanded Blake Griffin in that contract set us back years. Hopefully Monty won't be much of the same. Weaver hasn't been great, but I can't believe he's this bad at his job. No win November is going great. November. The Pistons are a crap team with a dimwit GM and an absentee owner. They alienated their fan base and never should have left the Palace. That's John in Lake Orion. Look, if the team was winning, LCA would be. Still getting pretty good crowds, which is amazing to me. Mm-hmm. But a lot of them now are going to go, I'm sure it'll be sold out tomorrow to see LeBron.
Probably.
I mean, where have any of these guys won at any level since high school? And they probably did it as individuals there. I mean, Cade threw the team on his back and took them to the tournament, but they failed in the tournament.
Yes.
Jaden Ivey failed in the tournament.
Jalen Duren, they didn't do it.
Where's any winning identity culture in them?
Bagley went to Duke. I don't know how far he went.
This college basketball is at a different place than when you were playing college sports.
Right.
And college football is a lot different. Well, you learned how to win and be who you were from somebody at Michigan.
Yeah. We learned from obviously Lloyd Carr, but you learn from the experience of those that have come before. And maybe they, at that time, right, 8-4, right? We learned how not to do it. So you got to try something else. Mm-hmm. You got to try something different. What is it that they're doing
I'm not
different?
Trying to stroke you here. I know how important and crucial that you were to the 97 team. You held players accountable. You went in and dragged kids out of parties. But somebody did that somebody taught that to you.
So you've got to have leadership. You've got to learn leadership skills on this team. All right. And part of the problem is that they are so young.
Right.
Who is the leader?
Maybe if they get stuff from their assistant coaches.
You're not going to get it from a head coach in the NBA because of the way the players rule this league.
That's why I said an assistant, somebody who played in the league, like Jarrett Jack. I don't know. That's a great question. Because they are devoid of any leadership.
Well, if you're ignorant and don't know how to do something, it is a little bit of an excuse. If nobody's ever showed you how to do something,
correct,
or taught you that, and I just don't know in the NBA culture if it can come from the head coach. And I think that's why he said a few weeks ago, being young is no longer an excuse. But
it's got to be player driven. There's no question. That was always my knock on the Lions. Was you've got to have player driven leadership. Alex Anzalone is one of those guys, whether you like him or not, has provided that defensively. You've got other guys that are stepping up, and then on offense. And you can love, you can hate, you can be on the fence with Jared Goff, but he's provided leadership.
Mm-hmm.